Breaking news this Monday night, the Prime Minister's new measures to investigate foreign meddling.
These threats evolve and continue to evolve.
As the RCMP investigates leaks to the media. The proposed class action lawsuit against an Ontario group home operator, the trauma former residents say they endured.
You have night terrors of the things that have happened.
And the allegations of diverted funds. Earthquake survivors suffering in Syria, their uncertain future, and the politics still preventing aid. Plus, nothing but deprivation and oppression.
We cannot go outside. We cannot thinking about anything that we want.
How lives of Afghan women and girls have deteriorated under the Taliban.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with breaking news from Ottawa. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he will take new steps to probe foreign interference in Canada's democratic process, including appointing what he calls an independent special rapporteur to decide whether it's necessary to call a public inquiry. But he is not establishing an inquiry himself, which is what opposition parties and others have been demanding. Our chief political correspondent David Akin is following all of this for us. David, what did the Prime Minister say?
Well, you mentioned that special rapporteur. That's really the big news, I think, today. The special rapporteur is a fancy term for an eminent Canadian. It might be a retired judge, someone with a lot of experience in national security. But most notably, Trudeau's saying that he will tell that special rapporteur to advise him on whether or not to hold a public inquiry, and he will abide by that individual's recommendation. We don't know who this person might be. That's going to be announced in the future. Another thing the Prime Minister announcing today is the government is going to take the first steps to establish a registry for those in Canada working for foreign governments. Might be Canadians working for foreign governments, might be people from other countries working for foreign governments. The government now says it's going to maybe establish a registry. Some work to be done on that. One of the other things, too, the Prime Minister announcing today is he's going to refer this whole matter of foreign interference to the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. That is NSICOP. Some people call it NSICOP. Some people call it NSICOP. But it's that committee of parliamentarians that the Prime Minister thinks should review this whole matter.
When democratic institutions are under attack, it is just that it be parliamentarians, elected officials, who should be stepping up to protect those institutions. This is why we created NSICOP.
Now, the MPs on NSICOP, they come from all parties. They have top secret security clearance, so they can review documents. But here's one of the problems, is NSICOP does not report to the House of Commons. It reports to the Prime Minister. And so the Prime Minister has the last sort of right of edit of anything NSICOP says. And it's for that reason and some others that I'm not so sure that what the PM announced today is going to fly with the opposition. In fact, earlier today, we anticipated that the Prime Minister might be establishing or referring this whole matter to NSICOP. And we asked both Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh what they thought about this idea of NSICOP looking at things, and neither of them liked the idea.
That's a trick, and that's a trap. What they would do is bring opposition MPs or leaders into a room, give them some information, and then swear them to secrecy so they couldn't ever speak about it again.
The process should be public, and that's why I do not support a committee like the one you referred to, the NSICOP, as an option. It's not something that will provide the transparency.
In fact, all opposition parties, Donna, want to still have a public inquiry, and they have managed through a variety of procedural processes to set up a vote in the House of Commons to have a public inquiry. Now, that vote may not happen for another couple of weeks. It's a non-binding vote. But think about this. The Liberals are certain to lose this vote in an inquiry, and if they do, it's a political pickle for the PM.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. With me is our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson. Mercedes, a committee, a special rapporteur, and plans for a foreign influence transparency registry. What do you make of all this, and why is the Prime Minister taking this approach?
Well, Donna, I think it's a sign that the political pressure has simply become too much, and the Prime Minister's office is realizing that this is something that's doing very real damage to their brand, and Canadians are concerned. They are seeing the Prime Minister out publicly, and in the past he's been saying, look, we've taken lots of action. Essentially, everything is fine. And yet we were seeing polling and seeing anecdotal commentary that Canadians don't feel that way, that they are genuinely concerned about foreign interference from China, as well as other countries. And that pressure left a lot of senior Liberals who I was talking to concerned that they could be vulnerable on this file. So this is sort of a classic Trudeau government move we're seeing. They're going to appoint an expert to make the decision for them. It slows down the political heat that's on them at this exact moment to say, look, we're not the ones who are making this decision. Somebody else is. We're passing it to them, but it will be an expert decision uninfluenced by politics. And they're going to hope that slows the leaks down too, which has been one of their other big problems here, Donna. They've hoped that sort of this story would run out of steam, and that hasn't happened. In fact, it's become a higher and higher heat score for them and more dangerous for them politically. So this is a chance for them to jump into that and to say that they are no longer going to be, making the decision themselves. They're going to allow someone else to do it for them.
Really quickly, do we know who that special rapporteur is, or when will we find out?
We don't know who, other than an eminent Canadian, and they will have to choose someone who they believe is above reproach, and they're going to announce it shortly. And one of that person's first tasks, apparently, will be to decide whether or not there's a judicial inquiry or a public inquiry into this.
All right, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thank you. Now to a Global News exclusive. A for-profit group home operator that was at the center of a Global News investigation last fall is now facing a $60 million proposed class action lawsuit. The company, called Hats Off, is one of the biggest operators of group homes in Ontario. These are homes for kids who have been abused, neglected, orphaned, or have behavioral issues. Our investigation revealed former youth who said they were over-medicated and violently restrained. One of them is now the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit. Our chief investigative correspondent, Carolyn Jarvis, has the details from Toronto. Carolyn.
Donna, when we spoke with Jamar Morrison last year, he told us that while living at a Hats Off group home, things became so dark, he tried taking his own life. Today, he says he's taking his life back, fighting to prove that what happened to him was wrong.
It shouldn't have happened to begin with.
Jamar Morrison, the lead plaintiff in a proposed class action against Hats Off, says he's still traumatized from living in their group home as a teen.
You wake up anxious and exhausted because you have night terrors of the things that have happened, the screaming, the yelling, the kids being thrown around.
Now he's suing Hats Off for what he says he endured. Those named include its president, Gordon Naylor, and his daughter, COO Bronwyn Naylor. The suit, which has not been certified as a class action, alleges Jamar and other kids living at Hats Off group and foster homes were treated in an abusive and demeaning manner, denied their dignity and basic rights. It says Hats Off homes were chaotic and hostile, and kids lived in fear. The allegations in the lawsuit have not been proven in court. Jamar says he was violently restrained more times than he can count while he lived there, and forced to take behavior-altering drugs. Hats Off responded in writing, saying it will defend against the lawsuit if it proceeds, calling it baseless, unjustified, and unproven, adding its homes have passed all ministry inspections, and any incidents that happen in residential care are reported and investigated by the Children's Aid Societies and ministry. It also previously told Global News that restraints are only used as a last intervention, when the safety of a child is at immediate risk, and after de-escalation techniques have failed. It also said it relies on healthcare professionals for decisions on medication and would never direct a staff to force a resident to take medication or reprimand them.
We hope to send a message to Hats Off, if we are successful, that when you are taking care of children, that their interests have to come first.
The lawsuit also alleges the defendants diverted funds meant for kids in their care to real estate holdings meant to personally enrich Gordon Naylor. Global News has estimated the value of real estate owned by the Naylor family and companies linked to them at $55 million. Hats Off says the only practical way to open programs for group homes was to purchase homes through personal debt, and that its private real estate assets were acquired through multiple private sources of income that have no relation to Hats Off.
Will the minister commit today to a full investigation into Hats Off?
The Ontario NDP has called for an investigation into Hats Off, which the government continues to sidestep. As for Jamar, he has a simple message for all for-profit group home operators.
Children before money.
Hats Off has also served a libel notice on Global News objecting to the series of stories we reported last fall. We stand by our reporting and maintain it was accurate and fair. Donna?
All right, Carolyn, thanks. Tomorrow we begin a two-part series exploring solutions to Ontario's child welfare system, looking at some organizations taking a different approach. Now to the aftermath of the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. A month later, and signs of the colossal damage are everywhere in the earthquake zone. Damaged buildings are still being demolished. Around 52,000 people are known to have died in the quakes. And in Turkey, 2 million people have been forced to leave the affected areas. In Syria, the situation is even worse. Survivors are living on the streets, waiting for help that is unlikely to come. Redmond Shannon reports.
The Arslan family spent 5 days in the rubble last month before being rescued. They say they're just happy to be alive as they recover a few possessions from the ruins of their home. About 2 million people in Turkey have fled the affected areas. The Youssef family, originally from Syria, moved to this apartment 700 kilometers from their damaged home.
Whenever we try to sleep, we dream of the earthquake and bad dreams. It's absolutely horrible, especially for my little brother.
Student Jalal Youssef says they can stay here for 2 months, but have no idea what the future holds.
The first time when we came to Gaziantep, we were Syrian refugees, and now we are Syrian refugees, and we came here due to the earthquake, and it's really awful.
In their homeland of Syria, the situation for those affected is worse.
Even as late as last night, there was a minor tremor.
Father Tony O'Riordan says thousands are still sleeping out in the open in Aleppo. The effects of the civil war have hampered aid, particularly in opposition areas. The opening of some border crossings has allowed UN aid deliveries to increase, but there remains little trust between the Assad regime and the international community.
But what is really frustrating is the current international position and the domestic position of the politics of Syria is impacting so cruelly on men, women and children.
Now, after a month, their fear is the world has already forgotten about them. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
In Greece, fury is rising in the aftermath of the country's worst rail disaster, which killed 57 people, many of them university students. Violent clashes erupted between demonstrators and police on Sunday. A 59-year-old station manager has been charged with negligent homicide and was jailed late last night pending his trial. The passenger train slammed into a freight train as they were traveling on the same track in opposite directions. The wreckage was cleared today, and the transport minister says there will be an investigation into decades of mismanagement of the country's railway system. In Ukraine, pressure is mounting on troops clinging to the eastern city of Bakhmut as Russian forces close in. Ukraine's top military commanders say they are holding the lines and want to keep defending the battered city, but it is nearly encircled. Speculation is growing. Ukraine has begun a limited tactical withdrawal. There are reports Ukraine has moved to destroy key bridges near the city. Russia is using intense artillery and airstrikes to try to secure its first major victory in more than 6 months. Bakhmut is considered a valuable gateway to the strategic Donbass region. A scare in the air. Coming up, what caused smoke in the cabin on this flight? Practicing patience. Thousands of Californians waiting to be rescued from the snow. And why a famous chocolate bar needs to ditch the mountain it mimics. There is no mistaking the triangular shape of the Toblerone chocolate bar. It is molded to mimic a famous Swiss mountain, but now part of the signature design is being forced to change. The image of the Matterhorn on the package is disappearing. Toblerone's parent company is moving some of its production out of Switzerland, and that violates the country's so-called Swissness law, which requires 100% of the raw materials for milk-based products be made exclusively in Switzerland. Toblerone will replace the Matterhorn with a modernized mountain logo by the end of the year. Parts of California will be digging out for days after fierce winter storms dump record amounts of snow, trapping some people inside their homes. In the past 2 weeks, almost 4 meters of snow has fallen, pushing the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada mountains to almost double the amount recorded in a normal year. Jackson Prosco reports on the rescues and what all that snow means for a state that's battled drought for years.
No one was ready for this. 2 weeks of storms delivering 2 entire winters worth of snow to California's Sierra Nevada mountains.
There's 9 and 10 foot berms alongside these roads. I don't see that improving for a month.
Thousands of residents are effectively trapped.
Oh my God.
Even if they could dig out of their homes, they wouldn't be able to get very far.
People like me are trying to get out that can and go deliver food and hike through 6 feet of snow to these homes that can't get out.
As the days wear on, worry has set in.
We have neighbors who are panicking. They're without, food, power, heat, medications.
Rescuers are airlifting in critical medical supplies like insulin. Food is another matter. The roof of this grocery store collapsed under the weight of all that snow.
I'm scared because we've been digging for days.
Some residents have been told they'll have to wait for up to a week for rescue. Still, all that moisture is a welcome sight in this parched part of the continent, erasing much of California's long-running drought. In 6 months, the entire state has gone from extreme or exceptional drought conditions to a far better picture where the driest areas face little to no drought at all. The start of a long road to recovery.
It takes more than a single wet year to really recover a lot of those groundwater basins that have been critically overdrafted for so many years during this drought.
Digging out is just half the battle. 2 new atmospheric rivers are expected to pummel the same areas in the next 10 days, bringing either rain, a rapid melt, and the risk of extreme flooding, or more snow to areas that have already had more than enough. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
Some scary moments for passengers on board a Southwest Airlines flight on Sunday morning. The plane was forced to make an emergency landing after the cabin began to fill with smoke. Some passengers began to panic and oxygen masks were deployed. The flight was en route from Havana, Cuba to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The airline says birds hit one of the engines and the aircraft's nose shortly after takeoff. The plane turned around and landed safely in Havana. Passengers had to use the emergency slides to get off, but no one was injured. Unexplained and unforgivable. Ahead, reactions to the suspected poisoning of hundreds of schoolgirls in Iran. Iran's supreme leader says poisoning schoolgirls is unforgivable and should be punished by death if it's found to be deliberate. It's the first time Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has spoken publicly about the suspected poisoning of hundreds of girls. Since November, there have been unexplained illnesses at 50 schools across the country. Public anger is growing over fears hardline Islamist groups opposed to girls' education may be behind the attacks. A suicide bomber on a motorcycle has rammed a police truck in Pakistan, killing at least 10 officers. Police had been on a routine patrol when the attack happened in Balochistan province. The force of the blast overturned the truck, which caused at least 7 injuries. It is the latest in a string of attacks against security personnel in Pakistan. The Prime Minister said those responsible were trying to destabilize the country. It's unclear who is responsible, but separatists in the region have long been in conflict with the government. Deprived and denied next, what the return of Taliban rule means for Afghan women. The future for girls and women in Afghanistan, once championed by the West, is very much in doubt now. The return of oppressive Taliban rule has brought the return of draconian interpretations of Islamic law, forcing women and girls back into the shadows. Tonight, we speak to one Afghan woman who used to help others and is now in desperate need herself. Turia Isri and Shugofa Danish report.
Each passing day feels like serving an indefinite prison sentence for women in Afghanistan.
It is like a jail. We cannot go outside. We cannot thinking about anything that we want.
Shokriya Etemadi helps deliver clean drinking water to remote areas. She was excited about starting a new position within the organization.
You were eager to work in a leadership position. What happened?
I passed the interview. At the end of the interview, they said for me, you cannot join with us because of the role and regulation of Taliban. And it's so hard for me.
It's only getting harder as time goes on. She shared her story with Global News reporter Shagufa Danish. Shokriya was her family's main breadwinner, but has not been able to earn a living since last December. The Taliban barred women from going to university and working in aid agencies in their escalating attack on women's rights.
My father is sick. Now we don't have anything in our kitchen room to prepare for dinner.
The United Nations warns extreme poverty and malnutrition are threatening millions of Afghans.
Afghanistan remains to be the world's largest humanitarian crisis in 2023.
Despite that growing need, there are fewer aid workers, with women now out of the equation. Charities like Care Canada have had to scale back or suspend operations, which is only adding to the misery.
We currently have 900 staff, and about 40% of those are women. The needs right now are incredible. The coldest winter in the last 15 years, I mean, those needs are not going to go away.
But those needs are competing for global attention with other conflicts and catastrophes.
Do you feel forgotten?
Yes, I'm not in a good condition. The most poor woman in the world, the most sad woman in the world. Now we are alone.
Alone and desperate to break free from a suffocating crackdown. Taria Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
Tomorrow, we'll tell you about the risks women and girls in Afghanistan are taking to get an education and how Canadian aid agencies are secretly lending a hand. That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Assiniboine River in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.